There are many patterns of symbolic stories that are being told within the manga Berserk. At face value, it is impossible to pick up these stories, but when interpreted from a psychological and symbolic way, the characters and their interactions throughout the storyline give a glimpse into the intricacies of the human psyche. This is truly where the story of Berserk shines, but one which is missed out by many fans of Berserk. Today we will dive into the symbolic meaning behind the pattern of the king and his daughter. We see two different occasions where the king keeps his daughter secured away from the outside world. This can be seen simply as a creative addition to the plot of Berserk, but within a psychological sense, it is far from a creative twist, but rather a deep exploration of the human psyche and its multitude of variabilities throughout time. We first get introduced to this symbolic concept through the Count and his relationship with his daughter Teresa. The Count captures Puck and gives him as a gift to his daughter. We learn through Puck as a mediating figure for the princess that she has been trapped inside her room for 7 years by her father. As he gives Puck to his daughter, he asks her, "Are you lonely, Teresa?" and then states, "Be patient, my dear. I couldn't possibly let you out into the impure world overrun by filth heretics." Then as he goes to touch her, you see the princess filled with fear and scream. The Count then says, "You still won't let me touch you?" and becomes furious and storms off. The princess then begins to open up to Puck about her father. She tells Puck how her father used to be a different man, a man of responsibility and courage, but her mother was kidnapped by a group of heretics. And when her father refused their request to worship their pagan god, they then sacrificed her mother to their gods alive. An image to note here is the occultist image of the Baphomet. I have noticed the importance placed on occultist symbolism and psychology throughout Berserk, but this is something we can explore in future videos. Now back to the symbolism of the king and his daughter. We can take the king as a scapegoat that confronts the evils of the world. His duty is to represent truth and what is good in the world. We see from a Jungian perspective that inevitably this aspect of the king suppresses the shadows that we hold, the untainted thoughts, emotions, desires, and beliefs. They do not disappear but creep into the material world through deceptive action. Berserk tells this story by using the daughter as a symbolic representation of the consequences of not facing one's shadow. For example, the king sees the tragedies of the world, poverty, cruelty, war, death, and the devil. As he loses his wife to the evils of society, his psyche craves the opposite, something that is pure and can be held as the example of what is good. Through facing the evils of the kingdom on a continuous basis, but lacking the awareness to acknowledge that such evils are also present in himself as a king, he uses his daughter as a sacrificial omen, who he traps inside the walls and prevents the contamination of evil. This is a symbolic representation of the king running away from facing his shadows, which is his fear of the impurities of the world, and his fear of losing his daughter. The symbolism is taken to the extremes, as we see when we are introduced to the king of Midland. After his daughter's purity is taken away by Griffith, the king succumbs to the evil he has shunned aside, as being only a part of the external world, and not within him. This is shown through his assault of his own daughter. Another symbolic psychic meaning of this pattern of representation of the king and the daughter is the desire for the psyche to move towards the extremes when not properly attended to. In this sense, the importance of self-reflection. The lack of reflection of the need for the balance between good and evil, and the trust in God who combats the evil that the king's daughter will face in the future, creates the psyche to push to its extremes to obtain what it wants. The fear of losing someone you love to the evils of the world can turn into evil itself. Throughout the king and the daughter archetype, Berserk tells a story that has been told for thousands of years within ancient Greek, King Cepheus and Andromeda, ancient Hindu mythology surrounding King Janaka and Sita, and Japanese mythology of Princess Kaguya. The king and the relationship with his daughter can thus be understood as a symbolic representation of the process of individuation. It outlines the dangers of not acknowledging one's shadow, and the ability for the psyche to project what it desires on one of the closest relationships that you may have in your life. The king projects his desires of purity, peace, and good onto his daughter. His psyche creates his deepest desires of a utopia and an ideal through the control of his own daughter. But the inevitable nature of life affects his daughter, and he crumbles into darkness and commits the sins that he has fought against all his life. A good contemporary example of this is the over-controlling mother, or the authoritarian father. Your father may go off to work, and feel a sense of lack of control over his destiny and his life. And when he returns home, he projects his deepest desires onto his son or his daughter. These are the symbolic psychological stories that surround the story of the king and the daughter. It exemplifies the human nature to project one's own desires and one's shadow onto their closest relationships in their life. Hope you enjoyed this interpretation of the king and the daughter in Berserk. And as always, take care everyone.